All right, hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to tackle cell respiration. For those of you in Mr. Martin's IB biology class, this stuff's like the backbone of so much in bio, so really understanding it's going to pay off big time.
Absolutely. It's not just about acing that next test either. Cell respiration, it's like this hidden engine driving all of life. Seriously.
Yeah, no kidding. We're talking growth, movement, even thinking. It's all powered by this process. And get this, we've got a mountain of resources to dig through your textbook chapters, those super detailed notes. Mr. Martin makes you take maybe even a lab report or two. Ready to make some sense of it all.
Let's do it.
Okay, so first things first. How do cells get the energy they need for all this amazing stuff they do? It's not like they've got little charging ports, right?
Well, they've got something way better. ATP, Adenosine Triphosphate. It's like the cell's version of cash.
Cash, I like that.
Every time a cell needs to do work like transporting molecules, contracting muscles, or sending signals, it has to pay with ATP.
Okay, so how does this cellular cash actually work?
It's all about those three phosphate groups attached to the molecule, the bonds between them. They're like these tiny, high-energy springs just waiting to be released. When a cell needs energy, boom, snap goes to the bond, and that energy is released to power whatever's going on.
Wow, like snapping a spring.
Yeah.
I get it. But how do cells make this ATP stuff in the first place? Where does it come from?
That's where cell respiration comes in. It's like taking the energy stored in food, mostly glucose, and converting it into that usable ATP energy.
So it's like our cells have these mini factories churning out energy.
Exactly. And these factories can run in two different modes depending on whether oxygen is around.
Yeah.
Anaerobic and aerobic respiration. Kind of like a car that can switch between gas and electric power.
Interesting. Okay, so break it down for me. What's anaerobic respiration all about? You know what's happening when we're like working out super hard and can't catch our breath?
Perfect example. Anaerobic respiration, it's like a quick burst of energy. It can happen without oxygen, but you only get a tiny bit of ATP, 2 ATP molecules per glucose to be exact. Think of it like a quick loan, you get the cash fast, but there's a price to pay.
And the prices.
Lactic acid buildup, that burning feeling in your muscles, that's it.
Ouch. Yeah, I know that feeling all too well. So not exactly the most efficient way to get energy.
Nope. Aerobic respiration, on the other hand, it's more like investing for the long term. It's slower, needs oxygen, but the payoff is way bigger. We're talking about
36
ATP molecules per glucose. Slow and steady wins the race, right?
Wow.
36
ATP, that's huge. So aerobic respiration, that's the key to maximum energy.
You got it. And the byproducts are just carbon dioxide and water, much better than lactic acid.
This is starting to make so much more sense. Okay, so both these types of respiration, they start with glycolysis, right?
Right. Glycolysis is like stage 1 of the energy extraction process. It happens in the cell's cytoplasm, same for both anaerobic and aerobic respiration.
Okay, so what happens in glycolysis? What are the main steps?
Imagine it like a 4-step dance routine for molecules. First up, phosphorylation, you add a phosphate group to glucose, kind of like attaching an energy handle, getting it ready to move.
Adding a handle makes sense. Then what?
Then comes lysis, splitting that glucose molecule in half, like cracking open a treasure chest.
Releasing the energy inside. This is getting pretty exciting for a molecule. What's next?
Next, you've got oxidation, stripping away electrons from those sugar fragments. It's like a tiny battery being drained to power something else.
Okay, transferring that energy. What's the final move in this dance?
The grand finale, ATP formation. Some of that released energy is used to create ATP. Finally.
So we're already making some ATP right here in glycolysis.
Yep. A net gain of 2 ATP and 2 NADH molecules for each glucose molecule. And remember, this is all happening in the cytoplasm, not the mitochondria.
Hold on, NADH, what's that all about?
Great question. NADH, it's like a little Uber for electrons. It shuttles them around the cell to where they're needed.
So what happens to those NADH molecules when there's no oxygen around? You know, like during those crazy, intense anaerobic workouts?
That's when cells get even more clever. They've got this backup plan called fermentation.
Fermentation. Okay, tell me more.
So in animals that pyruvate the end product of glycolysis, it gets turned into lactic acid. This frees up the NADH to keep picking up electrons and keep glycolysis going, even without enough oxygen.
So that's the lactic acid connection. Makes sense. What about in other organisms, though? Do they do something different?
Good catch. In yeast and some bacteria, pyruvate gets converted into ethanol and carbon dioxide.
Wait, ethanol. Isn't that what's in alcoholic drinks?
Yep. And the carbon dioxide is what makes bread rise. It's all thanks to fermentation. Pretty cool, huh?
That's so cool. Okay, so we've got the anaerobic side covered. But what about when there's plenty of oxygen around? Tell me all about aerobic respiration, the energy powerhouse.
Well, with aerobic respiration, we're taking those partially broken down sugar molecules from glycolysis and putting them through a way more powerful energy extraction process. This is where the mitochondria, those tiny powerhouses of the cell, they really shine.
Okay, so the mitochondria are like the main stage for this energy show.
Exactly. Aerobic respiration, it's got three main acts: the link reaction, the Krebs cycle, and then the grand finale, the electron transport chain.
Okay, let's take it step by step. Starting with the link reaction, what happens there?
Think of it like the pre-party for the Krebs cycle. Pyruvate, the end product of glycolysis. It gets a makeover, loses a carbon atom as carbon dioxide, and becomes acetyl-CoA, ready to enter the most exclusive club in the cell.
So pyruvate gets all dressed up with a new name. Acetyl-CoA. Got it. What happens next?
Acetyl-CoA hits the dance floor in the Krebs cycle, a series of reactions that break down those sugar fragments even further, releasing more energy.
So what's the main takeaway from the Krebs cycle?
It generates a little ATP directly, but more importantly, it produces a lot of NADH and FADH2, remember those electron shuttles. It also releases more carbon dioxide as a waste product.
So those electron Ubers, they're picking up even more passengers. Where are they going?
To the most dazzling spectacle in the cell, the electron transport chain. That's where the bulk of ATP gets made. Get ready for a wild ride.
I'm strapped in. Tell me all about this electron transport chain. It sounds intense.
It is. Picture a chain of protein complexes in the inner membrane of the mitochondria, like a series of escalators moving those electrons down a specific path. As those electrons move from one complex to the next, they release energy.
And that energy doesn't just disappear, right?
Absolutely not. It's used to pump protons across the inner mitochondrial membrane, creating a gradient. Think of it like pumping water uphill. You're building up potential energy.
Okay, I'm picturing like a dam made of protons, all that energy waiting to be released. What happens next?
That's where ATP synthase steps in, the real star of the show. It's an amazing enzyme embedded in that membrane, acting like a turbine in that proton dam.
So as those protons flow back down, they spin this ATP synthase turbine.
You got it. And that spinning motion, it literally cranks out ATP molecules like a tiny machine, converting that energy into usable cellular cash.
Oh, that is so cool. It's like this perfectly designed system. Okay, I'm super impressed by this electron transport chain, but what happens to those electrons at the end? They can't just keep going forever, right?
Right, they need a final destination, and that's oxygen. Oxygen is the VIP of this whole party, the final electron acceptor.
So that's why we breathe. It's not just about getting air, it's about supplying this crucial ingredient for ATP production.
You nailed it. Oxygen combines with those electrons and protons at the end of the chain, forming water and keeping the whole system running smoothly.
Okay, we've covered a lot here. How glucose gets broken down, the different ways to do it, anaerobic and aerobic, and that amazing electron transport chain. But we've mostly talked about glucose as fuel. What about other molecules like fats? Could they be used too?
Of course. Fats, or lipids, they actually store even more energy per gram than carbohydrates. They're packed with it.
Really? How come?
They've got more carbon-hydrogen bonds. Those are like little energy pockets. Think of it this way. Carbohydrates are like kindling. They burn fast, while fats are like logs. They burn for a long time.
Interesting. So fats are like our long-term fuel reserves, and carbohydrates are like a quick snack.
Exactly. But there's a catch. Fats can only be broken down aerobically, so they need oxygen.
Makes sense. So when I'm sprinting, I'm burning carbs, but when I'm running a marathon, it's those fat reserves kicking in.
You got it. The right fuel for the right situation.
Welcome back. I'm still thinking about those electron escalators and turbines we talked about in the electron transport chain. It's amazing how much is going on to keep our cells energized.
It really is. Speaking of energy, have you ever thought about just how much ATP our cells actually make?
Not really. Is it a lot? I mean, cells are so tiny.
It's more than a lot.
Yeah.
The average person makes and uses their own body weight in ATP every day.
Wait, what? So I'm making and using like 160 pounds of ATP daily.
Yeah.
That just blows my mind.
Sounds crazy, right? But it's true. It just shows how important cell respiration is for literally everything we do. Breathing, heartbeat, even thinking it all needs a constant supply of ATP.
That's incredible. It's like we're walking power plants fueled by this whole microscopic process.
Exactly. And the cool thing is our cells are pretty smart. They don't just stick to one energy strategy. They can switch between anaerobic and aerobic respiration depending on what our body needs.
So like when I'm sprinting, to catch the bus.
Yeah.
My muscles are probably using more anaerobic respiration for that quick energy burst.
Right. It's like the emergency backup system when oxygen is low. Keeps your muscles going even when they're not getting enough oxygen for that full aerobic respiration.
And then I pay for it later with all that lactic acid, ouch.
Yeah. Exactly. It's a trade-off. Once you catch your breath, your body switches back to aerobic respiration, more efficient, more sustainable for the long haul.
It's like our cells are always adapting, always figuring out the best way to keep us powered up no matter what.
That's one of the amazing things about biology, the adaptability of living systems. Think about organisms living in places with hardly any oxygen, like those deep-sea creatures.
Oh yeah, they must have some pretty interesting ways to get energy if they don't have much oxygen to work with.
They do. Some rely mostly on anaerobic respiration using different electron acceptors at the end of their electron transport chain.
So they've found ways to work around it.
Exactly. It shows how powerful evolution is, how life finds a way to thrive, even in the toughest spots.
Life finds a way. Yeah, that's for sure. This makes me think about mitochondria, those powerhouses where all the aerobic action happens. You think Mr. Martin will ask us about their structure on the test? I got to make sure my notes are good on that.
Knowing Mr. Martin? Probably. Remember, they have two membranes, an outer one and an inner one, the inner membrane. That's where the electron transport chain does its thing tucked away in all those holds called cristae.
Okay, yeah, more surface area for those electron escalators. But something that's always confused me, where do mitochondria come from? Do they just like magically appear?
That's a great question, and it leads us to one of the most interesting things about mitochondria. They have their own DNA.
Hold on. I thought DNA was only in the nucleus.
That's what makes mitochondria so unique. They have their own DNA separate, called mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA for short.
So what's the deal with this mtDNA? What does it do?
It's got genes that are essential for building and maintaining all those energy-producing parts, like the components of the electron transport chain. It's like the instruction manual for those mitochondrial factories.
So they're like little semi-independent units within our cells with their own set of blueprints.
Exactly. And here's the really cool part. mtDNA is inherited only from your mother.
Really? So my mtDNA is the same as my mom's.
Yep. Sperm cells do have mitochondria, but they usually get lost during fertilization. So all the mitochondria in the developing embryo and all your cells come from the egg cell, which means from your mom.
Whoa. It's like a tiny piece of my mom is living in every one of my cells.
You could say that. And because of this, mtDNA is super helpful for tracing maternal lineages and studying human evolution.
Wow, it's like a molecular family tree.
It is. Scientists have used it to track the migrations of ancient populations, even to identify the remains of historical figures. It's a powerful tool for uncovering secrets from the past.
I'm seeing mtDNA in a whole new light now. It's not just about energy, it's about our history and ancestry, too.
Exactly. It's a reminder that biology is full of interconnected stories from the tiniest molecules to the evolution of life on Earth.
Okay, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed with all this information. It's amazing how much we're learning about cell respiration and how it connects to so many other things in biology.
It's definitely a lot to take in.
Before we go to part 3, could we quickly go over the key things we've talked about in this part, just to make sure I'm following all these amazing details?
Sure. We've talked about how much ATP our cells make, the fact that they can switch between anaerobic and aerobic respiration, and the amazing world of mitochondrial DNA, and how it's passed down from mother to child.
That's a lot to think about. But I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together to make this incredible system that powers life.
That's great to hear, and there's more to come. In part 3, we'll explore some of the bigger implications of cell respiration, how it affects ecosystems, impacts our health, and even connects to climate change.
I can't wait. This is so much more interesting than I thought it would be. Stay tuned, everyone.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been exploring this amazing world of cell respiration, from those tiny ATP molecules to the electron transport chain. But now I'm kind of curious, how does all this microscopic stuff affect the bigger picture of life? Things like ecosystems and even our own health. That's a really good question, and it's what makes cell respiration so fascinating. It's not just happening in some lab, it's the driving force behind life at every level, from individual cells to entire ecosystems.
Okay, so let's zoom out from the cell level. Where should we start?
One of the biggest connections is through food webs and energy flow. Remember how cell respiration releases energy stored in things like glucose? Well, that glucose ultimately comes from the food that organisms eat.
So the energy that powers my cells It all starts with the sun captured by plants through photosynthesis. It's like this chain reaction of energy.
Exactly. Plants are the primary producers. They turn sunlight into chemical energy. Then herbivores eat the plants, carnivores eat the herbivores, and so on. And each time energy is passed from one organism to another, some of it's lost as heat.
So that's why food chains can't just go on forever. There's only so much energy to go around.
Right. Cell respiration, it's not just important for each individual organism, it's essential for the entire ecosystem to work properly.
It's like this huge web of life, all connected by this basic process of energy transfer. I never really thought about it like that before.
It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it, and it's not just about energy flow. Cell respiration is also tied to the cycling of matter, especially carbon and oxygen.
Okay, remind me, how does that work again?
Remember those byproducts of aerobic respiration, carbon dioxide and water?
Yeah, we exhale carbon dioxide every time we breathe.
Right. And that carbon dioxide is then used by plants for photosynthesis. It completes the cycle. Cell respiration is a crucial part of the Earth's carbon cycle, which affects everything from CO2 levels in the atmosphere to climate change.
Wow, so this tiny process happening inside our cells is actually connected to these huge global things. It's like that saying about a butterfly flapping its wings and causing a hurricane.
That's a great analogy. Okay, let's switch gears for a minute and talk about how cell respiration impacts human health.
Okay, things are getting personal now. What do I need to know?
Well, first of all, cell respiration is absolutely essential for keeping all our body functions running smoothly. If something messes with this process, it can cause serious problems.
Like what kinds of problems?
Think about mitochondrial diseases. Those are caused by mutations in that mitochondrial DNA we talked about earlier. These mutations can lead to a whole range of health issues: muscle weakness, fatigue, neurological problems, developmental delays even.
That sounds pretty scary.
It can be, but scientists are working hard to understand these diseases and develop treatments. And even for people without genetic disorders, things like aging and lifestyle choices can impact how well our mitochondria work.
So eating healthy and exercising regularly could help my mitochondria stay healthy.
Absolutely. Those good habits can make a big difference in how well your cells produce energy. And avoiding things like smoking and too much alcohol can protect your cells from damage.
Okay, this is making me want to go for a run and eat a salad. It's cool to think that we can actually do things to help our cells make energy.
You definitely can. It's empowering to realize that we have some control over our cellular health.
This whole deep dive has been so eye-opening. I'm starting this semester with a whole new understanding of cell respiration. It's not just some random thing in a textbook. It's like the core of life.
I'm so glad to hear that. It's a topic that never gets old for me.
Before we wrap up, let's do a super quick recap of the main points from part 3. We started by looking at the big picture, the ecological side of cell respiration, its role in energy flow and matter cycling, and how it connects to global issues like climate change.
Right. And then we talked about how important cell respiration is for our health, emphasizing healthy habits and the research being done on mitochondrial diseases.
Well, on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into cell respiration. We hope you've enjoyed the journey with us.
We definitely have, and we encourage you to keep exploring this amazing world of biology. There's always more to learn, more connections to make, and more mysteries to uncover.
A huge thank you to everyone for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back soon with another one on a totally different topic. Until then, keep learning, keep asking questions, and stay curious.